All right, folks, it is 7 o'clock, and I want to welcome everybody to our bare root tree presentation. My name is Toby Randall. I am a councillor here for the town of Carleton Place. I am also the council rep for the Urban Forest River Corridor Committee. And Jim McCready, who is the head of our Urban Forest River Corridor Committee, will be doing the presentation tonight. Before we start, I just want to give you a bit of a background on both Jim and Liam McIntosh. Liam is works for the town of Carleton Place and liaisons between the town and the Urban Forest Group with Jim McCready. So Jim is a graduate of the University of Toronto with a bachelor's degree in forestry. He's a registered professional forester, a certified arborist, and has 28 years experience with the Ministry of Natural Resources and Forestry. He established McCready Tree Forestry Consulting. And I think that's Jared Biddle that's making all the noise. Jared, mute yourself if you can. Thank you. He works closely with the town staff on tree programs, evaluating trees and making recommendations for planting. And has been looking after the bare root tree program since 1998, and also was the chair of the Urban Forest Advisory Committee since 1998. Liam is a public works technician and is the public works liaison with Urban Forest for the tree planting program, coordinates the ash tree injection program to protect from the emerald ash borer, and coordinates with Jim to assess all municipal owned trees and determines the ownership of trees between private citizens and also the municipality. So if there's any kind of decision that has to be made on who owns a tree on town land or private land, Liam is the gentleman that'll come out and look at that tree. So again, I want to thank everybody for attending. I see we have 41 people online, and I want to thank everybody for participating tonight, and also helping increase the tree canopy here in Carleton Place, which is very, very important. I know we see a lot of development going on, and any time that we can add trees back in to the municipality, that's a positive. So with that, I will turn it over to Jim. Jim's presentation is going to run roughly 40 minutes. It's going to be very descriptive. I'm going to ask that if you have questions, hold them till the end. And because of the amount of people that will be on the call tonight, we're going to ask that you do your questions through the chat, which is essentially the button right at the very bottom of your page. You hit the chat button and you'll be able to type out your question, and I will ask that question and Jim will answer it. So without further ado, I'll turn it over to Mr. McCready. Jim, it's all yours.
Okay, thank you very much. Liam? Okay, next slide, Liam. I just want to thank everyone for joining us tonight. We have people online who are ordering trees for the first time, and this is usually a presentation we give live. And unfortunately, we didn't have a program last year, and we decided we'd go webinar this year so we could have a program. And we have 150 trees that we are selling at $20 a piece. Just give you a bit of background where we came from. The Urban Forest Committee was originally brought forward by one of our past mayors, Brian Costello, and David Finley, and the two of them at the time were in communities that bloom, and lo and behold, there's a segment there that's urban forestry, and they got no points whatsoever on urban forestry. And I was asked to come in and put something together, and I did. And when the committee met, they said, oh geez, we need a committee. So we got a committee going in 1997. And then lo and behold, we got hit with the ice storm in 1998. And it was in 1998, we helped put together a plan for the town. And they ended up getting $183,000 from the federal government to trim, remove, and plant trees. And also that is when we decided that some of the best planting sites were on private properties. And that's when we started the bare root program, which you had to take a course, a 1-day, 1-hour course, how to plant the tree. And what is even more important is how to maintain that tree once you have planted it. So tonight, what you've got is people that are going to be purchasing the tree, but we also got a bunch of residents from the town. How do I maintain a tree and what have you, which is very important. And it's not rocket science. It's easy to do, but you have to know the tools of how to do it. Liam? What the presentation is going to be is it's going to be broken down into a couple of segments. The main segment is for those people that are going to be purchasing and planting the tree, what your plan should be, and prepare the spot, minimize stress when you pick up the tree. How do you plant it? How do you stake it? And how do you mulch it? And then the next one, which is extremely important, and driving around town, I understand that a lot of people do not know how to do this, is watering a tree, fertilizing, and some of the important things you got to do when it comes to pruning a tree. And then for those people that have got to pick up the tree, we're going to let you know where you pick it up, when to pick it up, and when you got to pick it up by. And as Councillor Randall said, we will save questions to the end. And besides that, we will give you, if you have more questions, the email address, my email, Councillor Randall's email, and Levan McIntosh's. So with that, we'll get going. Liam? One of the things you have to do, and those that are planting trees now should have done it, you've got to get yourself a locate. And locates are free, but you should come out. And one thing is, the more we plant trees, the more we find that a lot of our services are underground, hydro, the pipes and what have you. So it's extremely important to the town that you go ahead, and it's free, that you get your locate before you decide where that tree is going to go. Liam? Plan ahead. What you've got to do is actually plan ahead of what you're going to do. And what that actually is you got to take a look at where the tree is going to go, but also what is the size of the tree? Where can the tree go and what have you? What's that? And it's extremely important. What is the tree going to look like when it's fully grown? A lot of people plant trees, and we've seen this more so with species like spruce and what have you. They go ahead and they plant 2 or 3 spruce in the front yard, not knowing what it's going to look like in 30 years. And their whole view is blocked out by these 3 trees. What you have to do is you've got to plan ahead. How big is the tree going to be? And how fast is it going to grow? And is it going to overpower my property? Is it going to be too much for overhead lines? And so we got to take a look at it. And when I was putting this presentation together, one of the things one of the members said, well, how far do you have to plant and what have you? So Liam? So here is the recommended distances that you should plan ahead. And the recommended distance for hydro lines, that comes from City of Ottawa Hydro. So they take a look at it, and small trees, it's 2 meters apart. And those are trees that are under 7 meters in growth. You got medium-sized trees, should be at least 6 meters away. And there's the size of the medium-sized trees. And then you got your larger trees that should be at least 12 meters apart. The house distance is another one you should take a look at. And when we start talking about the house distance, we basically, this is rule of thumb with the International Society of Arboriculture, who I am a member of, and I'm a certified member under the International Society of Arboriculture. And this is the distances we usually go from the house. And one of the things you've got to remember is that when you take a look at the house, a lot of folks are worried about foundations and also their pipes and what have you. Trees normally do not go into a pipe or what have you unless it has been damaged and there's a bit of a hole and roots will find its way in there. When it comes to foundations, you do not get a lot of damage from roots finding their way into the foundations. Most of our foundations in Carlton Place today anyways are poured, they're not blocked, so you don't have a lot of worries about that. Saying that, we have species we are not planting in town. Willow, poplar, and silver maple, they have aggressive root systems and they will find their way into any area that has got a slight damage or what have you. So it's very, very cautious that take a look. This is how far you should be planting from the house. This is how far you should be planting from hydro lines. And a lot of our hydro lines now are underground, and that's why you need the locates. Liam? Prepare the spot. One of the important things is we are going to be planting bare roots. You've got to prepare the spot before you get your tree. And what you got to make sure you do is that you remove the sod. You're going to make the hole that much bigger, almost 2 to 3 times bigger than what your root is going to be. And what you're going to have to do, it's going to have to be planted to a depth that's the same as what it was planted in the nursery. And if you're not too sure how much was planted in how deep it was planted in the nursery, what you have to do is make sure you don't plant it too deep. Planting it too deep is worse than not planting it deep enough. And then you got to rough up all the sides and everything else so that the roots can grow. Liam? This is what you're going to be getting. You're going to be getting a bare root tree. And because you're getting this bare root tree, when you pick it up, you're going to have a method of keeping those roots moist. And we like the bare roots because basically I have got fellow certified arborists like bare root, and the other ones you can get is potted, and then you see the bigger wire and burlap and what have you. The problems with the other two is when they're lifted at the nursery, they got to take so much of the root off that you're eliminating a lot of your feeder roots. With the bare roots we're getting, you got the feeder roots, you got a smaller tree, you got quite a bit more of their roots. So it's very, very important that we use the bare root. And what you want to do when you go and pick up that tree is you must keep those roots moist. And it must be moist at all times. It cannot dry out for any more than a minute. And also the way you do that, you can do it with burlap. You can put moss, or you can put chips in a plastic bag and keep them warm in a large garbage bag, what have you, and keep them moist. And when you're transporting, make sure that you keep it very, very, very close and does not damage the branches whatsoever. That's very important as well. Liam, when you get home, you got to plant that tree right away. There has been instances in the past where we've known folks have taken the tree home, have not planted it right away, and the roots have dried out. So you got to get that tree home and planted right away. And what you do, you've already dug the hole, and because you have got that bare root tree, what you do is you spread out the roots. And when you spread out the roots, you put a mound right in the middle of your hole and spread out the roots over the middle of that hole. And that's one of the best ways of getting the roots started. And what you have to do is once the roots are all straightened, make sure you do not expose it to more than the dry winds, and you do not expose it to sunlight for long periods of time. Liam? So what you are going to do, you're going to put that root over the mound that's in the middle. Then what you're going to do is you're going to go ahead and you're going to fill that hole 2/3 full and packing it down very, very gently until you got the 2/3 full. Then what you're going to do is stomp it. And what you want to do is remove the air pocket that may be in there from your planting. And when you stomp it, that gets rid of that air pocket, because if that air pocket is there and we get into a drought condition, it will dry out the roots. So that's what you got to do, is go ahead and stomp it and get rid of that air pocket. From there, you're going to fill the remaining space with water and soil, and make sure that you get water into it and it drains down and fills the hole full of water. And then you go ahead and you finish planting. And what we call it is you make a ring around the outside so that when you do water the tree later, that the water will remain within that space. Liam? Staking. Here's another very important part that we must take a look at, and it is staking. And you'll see from the slide, there's different stakings that you can do. And one of the things we always ask ourselves before we stake is, do we have windy conditions? Well, in Carleton Place, we do. We have those northwest winds that come blowing in. And so we do have, windy conditions in Carleton Place. Do we have shallow soil? We certainly do. We're on the Smith Falls limestone plain, and sometimes you're lucky to get 18 inches of soil in Carleton Place. And we are planting a smaller tree. So what we do is, yes, we are going to have to go ahead and stake. And the 2 stakes you would use is, you can use the 1 stake method, or you can use the 2 stake method, and make sure that it is snug. And you can use material. What they've been using in town is wire with a piece of cut off hose, but there's other material that you can wrap around it and put the stakes in the ground and leave it there. What is very important is you see stakes in for a number of years. If you've had a good growing season, remove the stake in 1 year. And I say that because it helps the development of the root system and the trunk if it's on its own and it doesn't have to depend on stakes. So make sure that you do remove that stake after a year. If we end up with a very droughty year and the actual tree roots wouldn't grow because of the drought, maybe leave it in one more year and then remove it. Sometimes in our parks, you may see it in there longer. Well, actually, it's in there longer in the parks. It's to try to protect the tree from folks that may be playing around in the park and stuff like that. So this is some of the things that you've got to do when it comes down to staking. And there is new material out that you can use for staking instead if you don't want to use wire and you don't want to use the bit of hose and what have you. Liam, here's an extremely important one you have to do. And we're calling this, you're calling this mulching. And what you do for mulching, and there's a way of doing this, is that you want the mulch put down. And what it does, it helps to keep the moisture in on dry spells. It helps to regulate the temperature, both in the winter and in the summer conditions. And also it reduces the weeds that you may get around the tree. It is extremely important that you go ahead and have it mulched. And what you do, and there's a certain way of doing it, is you go ahead and you spread it out, the mulch out for about 3 feet. And what you do is it's going to be about 3 to 4 inches thick. And the common stuff you can use is you can use leaves, you can use litter, you can use wood chips, you could use shredded bark, you can use peat. And at times there is wood chips that's down at the town yard that we have used, and you go and pick that up. It's extremely important to do this because it doesn't only give you a climate for that tree, it also keeps the lawnmowers and the whippersnippers away. Whippersnippers, if it damages that new bark that's on that tree, that is an instance of weakening that tree and you could get mortality. Another thing, and I've got it down there and I have walked around town at times, don't volcano. And what I mean by that, you do not put your wood chips up against the trunk because what it does, it moisturizes the trunk and some of that bark decays and what have you, and you get mortality. One of our clients years ago that got a couple of oaks, I went out and I had a look, they said it died back. What they did the volcano, and as a result, the bark on the tree got very mushy and what have you, and the 2 trees died. So don't volcano it. I know a lot of people like to volcano. It looks nice, but don't do it. And what you're going to have to do is have a look, and what you're going to have to do is replace that mulch maybe about every 2 years. Next is watering. And this is, we're getting into the maintenance of it, folks. And this is extremely important. What we are trying to do is get the roots to go down and not along the surface. So a lot of people feel when they're watering their lawn, they're watering the tree, but you are not. What you're doing is getting that tree roots to the surface. And you don't want that, especially if we get into dry conditions. So what you want to do is those roots to grow down. And to do that, the rule of thumb is that you take the nozzle off the hose and you let it trickle for at least 2 hours. So that's what you'll do with the new planting of the trees. With those that have not got older trees, you can do the exact same thing. And one of the rules of thumb, if we do not get at least 20 millimeters of rain a week, you should be watering that tree. And for older trees, you could do it, once a week, 2 hours to 3 hours watering. That could do it for the older trees. What you want to do, barring any rain or what have you, or if we get into real drought conditions, you may want to do the watering a couple of times. So your priorities for watering, first is your garden, second is your tree, third is your lawn, because your lawn will turn brown, but it'll always come back. And you will continue doing this all the way through the summer until about mid-fall. Another one is fertilizing. And I am, like I told you, I'm a member of the International Society of Arboriculture, and our system for actually fertilizing is you do not fertilize the first year. When you're planting your tree, you could put some bone meal in the bottom or what have you. The important thing in planting that tree is actually having loose soil. You want your tree to grow into the parent soil. And there used to be an advertisement on TV for cheese. Don't feed the kids to cheese because they won't leave home, if people remember that one. Well, it's the same thing for the trees. Don't give it fertilization, because what it'll do, it'll stay around that good soil, that fertilized soil, and it won't go into the parent roots. We want it to go into the parent roots. So what you have here in the diagram, you have the diagram of your anchor roots and then your feeder roots. And it's your feeder roots that we want to go into the soil, and it's your feeder roots that takes up all the moisture and all the, should I say, moisture and nutrients and what have you. And what you want to do is, if you, that first year, everything has got to go into the root system. We do not want a lot going into the top and to the leaves. We want to establish that root system first. And in following years, it's nitrogen that'll get your leaves and that to grow. Use slow release nitrogen, and some like using fast acting fertilizer. And if you're going to do that, do it in the spring. Do not fertilize after August. And I'm saying that because in August, your buds have been established for next year. So your buds are already there for next year. If you go ahead and fertilize, there's the chance that those buds may flush and you may be in trouble for next year. What works very well is, and it's very easy for you to do, is go to the nursery or Canadian Tire or one of those, and they got fertilizer stakes. They got them for conifer trees, they got them for the deciduous trees, and follow the directions in the package and put those stakes in. And that's one good way of fertilizing. Next. Here is another important one. And I see this being abused right across the town. And it's actually the pruning. And it is to improve branch space and promote a strong structure. And you should be doing this annually, having a look at your trees, and you start when the tree is young. And there's different times to prune. Deciduous trees should be pruned when they're dormant, late fall. But if you see dead branches or broken branches, they can be pruned at any time. Of these three diagrams you see the 2 leader at the very end. What you have to do is reduce and take out one of those leaders. And I'm going to give you an example. And I have a 100-year-old tree, and I love it very much, and it puts shade on the house and everything else, but it's got 2 leaders. And with those 2 leaders, what I've had to do is cable them. And I've had to put 2 cables in them, and that's costly. Plus, when you put cables in your trees, you've got to go ahead and you have got to have it inspected every 2nd or 3rd year to make sure everything is holding, especially for insurance purposes. So the biggest mistake I see in town is allowing that second, I call it a leader, to be there. Get rid of one of those leaders. Usually you go with the smaller one, reduce the smaller one, and pick the more aggressive one. So it's very important that you do that, and you make sure one of those leaders is gone. And you do it at a young age. You know, you start very young, when it's 3 to 5 years old, up to 12 years old, something like that. Next. And you continue pruning. It's very important. You remove dead branches. You remove broken branches. And one of the things you should do, and I've noticed some of these trees, and especially some of the fruit trees, the apples that you're going to be getting, and your service berries, you see these suckers coming up from the base. Remove them right away. What you want is the tree to put all its energy into its foliage at the top of the tree. You do not want it to put in its energy to the suckers that are going to be coming up. So anytime you see any suckers, remove those suckers right away. Liam? And this is extremely important. And I'm going to tell you, look at the branch collar. The branch collar is extremely important when you're pruning. You have to leave the branch collar on. The branch collar has got the cells that help, when you're pruning, help the tree shade over that cut that you're going to do. And what you're going to do is basically you're going to make the cut on a dead branch right where it is right there. And once that cut is made, what the tree is going to do is heal itself over that cut. And anyone that has done any pruning, you'll see a callus starting to form. That's extremely important. And before anyone asks, one of the questions is basically, do you use pruning paint? And the answer is no, you do not use pruning paint. The reason being is ISA has basically taken a look at it, and the pruning paint, when they used to use it, used to inhibit the branch collar cells from healing itself. So it's very important right now not to use any pruning paint. Saying that, maybe tomorrow they'll come up with some kind of chemical or something you could put on the wound that you make, and basically it will allow the cells themselves from the tree to heal itself and what have you. But right now we don't use that. What we got to be careful of is we do not leave a stub when you do go ahead and do the pruning, because if you leave a stub, you cannot get the tree to heal itself, and that's an entry point for insects and disease. Likewise, you do not want cut it flush right down the side of the tree, because again, you've removed the cells that the tree can heal itself. Plus, it's an entry point for insects and disease. Now you can see at the bottom one in B, you can, the smaller cuts, you can use a pruner or what have you to do it. Now, a lot of you are going to have larger branches, and the larger branches, we use the three-way cut. And the first cut is underneath, because what you want is when you do the second cut, it's going to bend right at the first cut and you cut it off. Then you can go and you can do your third cut, which leaves your root branch collar in place. And you want it left in place so that it can heal itself. If you were to go ahead and just start cutting at your third cut there and not do the three cut, what you're going to do is rip a lot of that bark off, and you're also going to rip a lot of your cells off. So that's extremely important that you follow these ways of cutting, and make sure that your branch collar is left intact. Liam? Now, where do you get your tree and what have you? So what we're looking at right now is we have ordered the trees, and the trees at the Carlton Place Nursery. And for those that are new on town, that is on County Road 29 going into Elmont. And you can start picking up your tree this Saturday, May the 8th. Something else that's extremely important is payment has to be made. And this is the way that you go ahead and make the payment. You can call into the number 613-257-6200 and use credit card, or you can place the cash or a check in a sealed envelope and take it to the fire hall, the OPP station. There's a drop-off box that you can use and just put it in there. And we have moved the pickup date. It was originally, everything was to be picked up May 15th, but right now, because there was a bit of delay of trees coming in, it has been extended to May 24th. So what you got to do is you got to pick up your trees by May 24th. Next slide. And if you don't pick up your trees by May 24th, what the town has been doing in the past, you cannot hold those trees there that long. That the town goes ahead and plants the trees wherever they need the trees in town. And basically there has been a donation made by yourselves to the town, and we have utilized that. And surprising, in the past, people have just forgot to pick up the tree or have other reasons they didn't pick up the tree, and we have gone ahead and had to plant them in other locations. Next. Now for questions.
Okay, thank you very much, Jim, for that detailed presentation. Maybe Liam, if you can stop sharing your screen, we'll get everybody back on screen. Now, I noticed through the presentation there were a couple of questions, so I am going to ask the questions, Jim, and let you know who asked the question, and then you can answer. So a question from Danielle R is, for watering, if the tree is planted farther than your hose can reach, how much do you suggest for pails of water, etc.? I know that you're saying kind of the trickle method is the way to go, but if you don't have access to a hose that far, what's the best way to go about it?
I would say what you're going to have to do is take a few buckets out, water it, and you had to make sure you had the ring around the tree. So you take a couple of buckets out, water it, and then it'll soak down, then take a couple of other buckets. So what you want to do is make sure the water is going down. So go ahead, and I would say in the long term, maybe do it about 3 times, a couple of buckets each time. And especially if you get into the real dry conditions.
Thank you. Question from Tina Crampton. Should bone meal be placed in the hole before you place the tree root into the ground?
Yes, go ahead. Anything you're going to put in there, you put the bone meal in so it's at the bottom, and then you fill in the hole. Because what you want, you got to remember, you want the tree root to go down as well as out into the apparent soil. And if you wanted to, you can mix a bit of it at the base of the tree before you do it.
Jim, just to follow up to that question, is there anything else besides bone meal that you would put in, or just strictly bone meal?
Well, you can put anything like moss or anything in there. The main thing we want is to want those roots to grow into the parent soil and to grow out. So we don't want the roots to stay within that pocket we've made where we've planted the tree. We want those roots to go out. And especially in that first year, we want the roots to go out.
Okay, next question from Amy. Roughly how tall, she looks like she's got a service berry. Roughly how tall should she be expecting that tree to be?
That tree could be in the neighborhood of 4 feet, 4 to 5 feet.
And will most of the trees be that size, Jim?
Most of the trees are around that size. Some of the service berries are smaller trees. What we've had to do is order a lot more smaller trees because a lot of the homes that are being built now are closer together. So we got a lot more smaller trees than we've had before. But when you come right down to it, we want those spots where you can plant larger trees, because it's the larger trees that give off more oxygen and take in more carbon dioxide.
Excellent, thank you. Peter Wright is asking, what size root should we expect? Like, what's the overall size of the root base?
From what you saw, and your root is probably going to be in the neighborhood of, it can be about 1 foot and 1 foot long, and maybe about 1.5 feet to 2 feet wide.
Excellent, thank you. Liam, this is actually gonna be a question for you. The next 2 people are asking about the recording of this session and the slides. Can you just explain where we're gonna put those, the copies of this, so that people can look at it afterwards?
Yeah, so it has been recorded. We'll be posting that, I assume, on our website as well as our Facebook page. But I can also send out the slideshow to the group after the presentation's done, just so everyone has them. Excellent,
great idea. Thank you, Liam. Sandra is asking, and she laughs, but it is something that we've had problems with recently. The Urban Forest Group has discussed this quite a lot recently, actually, is how do you protect from beavers, Jim?
Get a trapper. No, the actual way that we used to, and we haven't had beaver problems, and so we haven't done it in a while. While you get hardware cloth, and that's the wire that you can buy at Canadian Tire, what have you, and it's a thicker wire than chicken wire, and you wrap it around the tree. And that's a good way of protecting that tree. The one thing is, as the tree grows, you have to make sure you loosen up the wire or you have to put it in bigger wire. And another thing I never brought up, and I don't know if anyone's going to ask it, you see people that put the plastic sheathing around a tree. And our recommendation, and that is protected from voles and mice and everything in the winter from chewing on it. What you do, if you want to use that, you put it on in the winter time, but make sure you take it off in the in the spring, because you may get that condition where you may start rotting some of the bark, and you could kill the tree in the long term.
Excellent, thank you. Next question we have is, excuse me, can trees be planted temporarily in a large pot until we're able to plant it in its permanent site?
These roots are too big to put into a pot. What people have done in the past, and especially some of the new homes that are going in and landscaping hasn't been completed, they have found a spot where they have planted it, and then you transplant it later on once you've got a hole in that it's ready to plant in. But be careful when you do that. You do your planting basically in your May, June, but you don't do plantings in July and August in the hotter, but you can do it in September. So my suggestion, if you're going to get a tree, put it in its temporary hole in May and move it in June. Or if you can't move it in June, move it in September.
Excellent. Laurel, I hope that answered your question. Derek McParland said he had a locate completed in the fall when the previous tree was removed. The markings are still in place. Is he required to have a second one now that he's planting it, or can he use the existing one?
I'll throw that one over to Liam.
Yeah, so I think it depends on the utility company, but I think that they expire after 3 to 6 months. So even though things haven't necessarily changed underground, if you were to ever hit anything and you didn't have an up-to-date locate, I think that would come back on you. So it's probably a good idea to call it in.
Thank you, Liam. Victoria, I'm planning to plant an apple tree, but later I also want to plant some evergreen. What type of evergreen is not going to interfere with the apples? Also, which evergreen tree won't be too large at the base?
They all get large at the base. What you would have to do is be prepared to prune those lower branches at the base. If I was to plant an evergreen and wasn't going to get too large at the base, it'd be a white pine.
Now, is there
white pine are very much, they grow up and they don't grow out.
Okay, and will any of them interfere with the production of apples?
They shouldn't. If you keep depends on how far away it is from the apple tree. You don't want the tree you're planting to go ahead and block the sun in that from the apple tree that needs that sun for the apples. So it's the shade is the important thing. What they can do with white pine is when it's grown, they can always prune off some of the lower branches.
Thank you. This is questions from Amy and Liam. It's gonna have to go to you. Jim mentioned wood chips from the town yard. Are citizens able to grab a bucket of those? And if so, do they need to make an appointment to do so?
Yeah, so we have the chips down at the chipper yard. So when it's open on Wednesdays from 3 to 8 or Saturdays from 8 to 12, residents can go in over near where the chipper's parked, by the leaf bags, and definitely ask staff to assist them with grabbing some chips, and you don't need an appointment. You can go anytime it's open.
Excellent. Thank you, Liam. Hope that answered your question, Amy. Amanda, if I'm planting 2 varieties of apple trees, how close should they be in order to cross-pollinate?
That's a good question. And I think it depends on the species that you're planting. So I would look, boy, about 15 feet.
She says they're Cortland and Honeycrisp, if that makes a difference.
So it's 2 different
type
of apple they're planting. Yeah. No, I would make sure you want the apple. So You want the apples off the tree, and then you take it from there as far as, so I would say 15 feet at least.
Okay. And Laurel's asking, how are the roots being protected right now before they're being picked up?
The nursery usually packs them in, maybe in sand and something like that. I haven't been out to the nursery this year. Liam, have you?
No, I've not.
Okay. But in the past, what they usually use, sometimes they use, they can pack them in sand, they can pack them in, keep them moist with bark chips, stuff like that.
And Laurel is making a comment, but also a question, I guess, is she's saying we should arrive with the necessary items such as mulch, etc. I'm assuming that you want to have all your materials ready at your residence when you go to plant that tree, Jim. Like, you don't want to be farting around waiting to go get stuff after you've got the tree in the ground.
No, you want everything right there, you know, when you plant the tree. And but let's put it this way: if you have to and you can't, you can go ahead and pick up everything later.
So
the important thing when you do the plant is definitely you go ahead, you plant it, you pack it down, you make your dish around it and what have you. You make sure you get the water to it. That's the important stuff. If you don't have the material for your mulching, that can be done at a later time.
And so to answer your question, Laurel, she just added something onto it afterwards. You don't need it all when you go to pick it up. Best just to have it at the house when you are going to plant.
Oh yeah, yeah.
So just to reiterate,
what you need when to pick it up is, you know, even if you got burlap, wet burlap or something like that, you want to keep those roots moist. So however you want to do it while it's traveling, that there's many ways of doing it. So whatever suits you the best.
One way that I've found in the past, Jim, picking them up is basically if you have an empty recycle bin and you fill it with mulch or leaves or something like that and wet them, it's big enough normally that you can just put the roots in there and cover them back up, and that way you can keep them moist. So it seems to be a good size container.
And Ann Cochran, and maybe Liam, you could answer this too. Do you know how long it takes to roughly to get a locate done?
Should be less than 2 weeks. I don't know what they're like right now. Normally you can get them a lot quicker than that, but if they're busy, they can take up to 2 weeks. I'm not sure right now what they're at. And so just a reminder, Jim, if people haven't got their locates done, and so they pick up their tree and they're waiting on their locate, how do they temporarily store that tree to protect it?
Yeah, the best way would be you got to keep the roots moist. So if you have a container, a large garbage can or something like that, keep the tree in there at this and fill it full of mulch or what have you to the same level it was planted at the nursery.
And also just to reiterate, if you haven't got your locate done yet and you call tomorrow to start the process, you still have to the 24th. So from the 8th to the 24th, you still got a bit of time. You don't want to leave it too late, but you still have time to get that locate done, depending upon, as Liam said, how busy they are. And Liam, maybe you can answer this. Do we need a locate for the backyard as well, or just the front?
You're supposed to get them anywhere.
Okay. So Victoria's asking about the height of the trees. I think Jim had mentioned that they're roughly 4 to 5 feet, Jim, most of the trees.
That's about it, yes.
And would it fit in if you've only got a car to transport this thing, And any best practices on transporting the trees if your method of transportation is limited?
Does the back seat come down?
So
Like I've got a car, my back seat comes down and I can get it in. The best way is by truck, but a lot of people don't have the truck.
make a friend with somebody that owns a truck. I've got about 3 of them. Liam, you
Yes.
be one. If I ever need to move a tree, Liam, it's going to be you. And would you transport it on? I think it would be hard to keep the roots moist by transporting on top of the car.
It would be very difficult to keep it moist unless you can wrap, put wet leaves or something in a garbage bag and wrap the garbage bag around those roots.
You just don't want them, the wind would dry them out.
Yeah, that's right.
If they weren't protected.
That's right.
Okay, the questions have slowed to a trickle. If there's any other questions, we were hoping that we would keep this under an hour if possible, which we're 4 minutes ahead of. So if you've got no other questions.
There's one more slide that Liam wants to put up.
Yep, by all means. And
And
Derek, you'll have to ask Liam about the planting portion of that.
And one thing I want from the folks out there, usually we do this live. This is the first time we put a webinar together. Want to know how well it went with them and any suggestions for other years that we can improve on this presentation be greatly appreciated. So here's contact information if you need more information. Here are the 3 websites or the emails you can get a hold of us, and we can answer any other questions that you may have.
And so I'll say, if you have tree related questions, don't call on me, because I've learned as much tonight as the rest of you have. If you've got any issues regarding town related stuff, by all means, reach out to myself or Liam. And anything with regards to the presentation tonight, or tree related questions, by all means, please reach out to Jim. He's just a wealth of knowledge and is always glad to help when it comes to trees. I truly want to thank everybody again for participating tonight and taking part. I want to thank Jim for the great presentation, and Liam for the help, and Amanda Charenier behind the scenes got us all set up on Zoom. Thank you very much again. Trees are extremely important here in Carleton Place. We try to plant them as often as we can. And I want to thank the hard work of the Urban Forest River Corridor Group. If you're ever looking to give back volunteer-wise and you want to join a committee of council, the Urban Forest may be one that would interest you. Always lots of great conversation that goes on with our committee. So unless there's other questions, which I'll quickly just take a peek at, Jim, unless you've got anything else you want to add, I'll bid everybody a good evening.
Okay, thank you very much, Councillor Randall, for doing this for us.
I'm my pleasure. And there's no more questions, Jim, so that's it for the evening if you've got nothing else to say.
I have nothing else to say. Thank you very much.
Excellent. Thank you very much, everybody. Hope you enjoy your trees and have a great evening.
Okay, great evening, folks.
Thanks, everyone.
Thanks, it was great.